Welcome to this week's edition of the Business7 show. This week we hone in on the ease of doing business and hear what the Forum of German-Speaking Namibians has to say about the matter. Welcome to the Business7 show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much, Ohone, for the invitation and for the platform provided. It's always appreciated.
The forum recently had a seminar on the ease of doing business. Just take us through what led to that and the intended outcomes.
The intended outcome was to move the public and the private sector closer to each other, to establish a common vision, to increase our performance on the ease of doing business, which has not been standard. The standard has not been good. Now, obviously, the ease of doing business is a key factor where you measure investors' ability to find their feet, to enter a country and to find their feet. So it's things like how long does it take to register a company? How long does it take to open up a bank account? But it's not just those administrative hurdles, it's also regulations, the processing of visa, employment visa, permanent residence visa, all that. Investors are, as we know, very, very demanding, and they, at the end of the day, they want a return on their investment as fast as possible. But they are very important in driving employment, and providing investment capacity drives employment. And we've not been doing well with that for the last 7 or 8 years. We've not been attracting net direct investment outside the oil and gas and the mining sectors, outside of those. Yet, macroeconomically and geopolitically, there are a few signs where we could really grab the low-hanging fruit quite easily. A lot of things have changed. In Europe, in 2022, with the invasion of the Ukraine by Russia, we've got the Gaza conflict still ongoing, which we see daily on TV. We are witnesses to what is happening there. So people in Europe are perceiving Namibia, and I think that's an important message. They're perceiving Namibia as a potential safe haven to invest or to at least diversify their investments. A businessmen like to diversify their investments. They like to spread the risk, and they're saying Europe is maybe becoming too risky. Let's take a portion of our portfolio to Africa. And if in Africa, where do we invest? Then Namibia comes up immediately, because we've got peace and stability, we've got regular transition of power, we've got an independent judicial system. That is the good sign. The bad sign is we are not implementing and attracting the investment we could.
I'll get back to the fundamental issues, but for me, I think critically what I want to establish off the bat is why does the forum have a particular interest in this issue of ease of doing business?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking that. It's one of our key objectives in terms of our constitution. We are saying we want to promote and enhance, not just promote and enhance Namibia as an international investment destination. The forum is German speaking, and a lot of investment comes from Germany or Austria or Switzerland. And we can really facilitate a lot in terms of the smaller investments to Namibia, the ones that will also create a lot of employment, because we are in contact with these people, and the people, when they come to Namibia, they say, oh, let's speak to somebody that is German speaking. It's not necessarily a requirement, but it's just so more convenient. And we want to use the connections that we have with Germany, because obviously a lot of our forefathers come from Germany, and we are still well connected with Germany. I myself, I've worked in Germany. I know the mentality, and it's important that one understands the mentality of investors, and that one bridges that gap between maybe what Namibia can offer and what the investors really want, and that one really acts as a broker in all spheres, in making the investor happy and making sure he does invest in Namibia.
Okay. Another key issue is the messaging around Namibia, and economists, commentators often speak to the issue of, well, there's the Investment Act, there's NEF or on NEEB, and it doesn't seem like there's any consistency with regards to getting the right message out for Namibia Incorporated. How concerned are you as a forum?
I'm very concerned about that. It's, again, great that you touch on that one. It's our policies. There's a lot of uncertainty created. We must now maybe go back 6 years. Where are we now? 2025, 2018, 2019, there was a lot of net capital leaving the country because of uncertainties. And you mentioned them, NEP and the Investment Promotion Bill. Then there is an Immigration Act that have all still not been finalized. Okay, and the President said in New York, for instance, on Monday at the United Nations that she will look at that the Investment Act and the Investment Acts are finally promulgated and finalized. And I think that's one thing that investors want and need is certainty. Okay. Then we promised in 2022, we promised a golden visa, which would set the benchmarks for people from Europe or from people outside Namibia investing in Namibia and wanting to maybe get even a permanent residence or a work permit, that the benchmarks for permanent residence, for instance, would be really set. Currently, we know we've really gone a step back because Home Affairs has not been processing any permanent residence applications lately because of a pending court case. On Saturday, they gave us the comfort that they've changed their stance and they will be re-looking at other permanent residence applications again, based on the advice received from the Attorney General. So that was an important outcome of our dialogue that we had on Saturday. But to sum it up, investors need certainty. And the certainty we have not provided. Now, since 2022, geopolitically, a lot of things happen in Europe. I mentioned it earlier on.
Yeah.
Now, there is an increased interest again to invest in Namibia. Okay, but it seems like the hurdles and the stumbling blocks are just increasing instead of decreasing. We're making it more difficult for investors. The question is why?
Just to touch on this issue, and it's one I like asking guests on the show because I still think that it's a particularly important point. Is this recent pronouncement, and we don't know what the official stance or what the official position of government would look at. When we had the mining expo, there was this proposal that government or Namibians take 51% stake in new mining ventures. We don't know if that's carried free interest or whether there would be an element of equity involved. Again, don't you think that provides some harm to this reputation of Namibia?
It's definitely one of the wrong messages that we are sending out. We are increasing the uncertainty instead of decreasing the uncertainty. I think it's wrong signals being sent into the business world. I think it's high time that, and that was really the start on Saturday with the Ease of Doing Business seminars, that we start talking to each other, the public and the private sectors. You know, why do we need investment? You know, Roland Brown, well-known economist and director of Cirrus Capital and founder of Cirrus Capital, he portrayed that message quite effectively. You know, why we need investment, because investment drives capacity and capacity drives employment. And we are maybe a little bit blindfolded by the oil and gas sector because there's a lot of money coming in there for all the research that is taking place there and for all the explorations. But we must also look outside the oil and gas sectors. You know, we must also look at what creates real and long-term employment, and there we've not been doing well. The interest is there, I can confirm that. I'm a tax consultant by profession. I get a lot of requests from Europe. The interest is definitely stronger than it was before 2019, okay? But we are not we're not capitalizing on those opportunities that present themselves.
It's actually interesting that you touch on the issue of oil and gas, and one would tend to think that are we perhaps not putting the cart before the horse instead of the horse before the cart, and sort of trying to just sort out ideally what could drive investment.
You know, if an opportunity like oil and gas and the energy transition, all the talk about green hydrogen, there we've seen Mr. James Mnyupa no longer being in charge of the Green Hydrogen Council. So there's a lot of uncertainty. I think the President is still picking her team and finalizing a team, but we are playing already every day, every weekend in the league, so we can't afford to wait much longer. It's like a team that is changed at the beginning of a season. In professional soccer, you need to perform as a coach immediately. So I think the waiting period is over. The oil and gas and the green hydrogen sectors presented themselves basically in the last 4 to 5 years. Before 2020, nobody was talking about it. And especially on the energy transition, on the green hydrogen, the late President Hage Geingob seized the opportunity, and he saw the opportunity, and he tried to make Namibia attractive. But now we must do the next steps. Okay? If at the same time we've got other investors also interested in doing various things in Namibia, we must create the capacity. We can't say we are just concentrating on oil and gas, and NIPDB's capacity is tied up in oil and gas and the green hydrogen sector. We must then increase that capacity, and I think we are very bad at that. As Namibians, let's be maybe also critical, we don't provide the capacity. You know, if I look at the elections last year, the way they were conducted, you may say, what is that? What does that have to do with ease of doing business? It was a capacity problem that we had. We didn't plan for that properly. So what we are trying to portray as a Forum of German-Speaking Namibians is, yes, there's the oil and gas sector. Yes, there's the green energy sector that's maybe already handled by NIPDB at a bilateral level. But let's not forget about all the other little investors that want to come in. And let's handle them at the same time. Why not? The opportunity presents itself. We must be able to handle both. Obviously, it will take a lot of capacity, and there will be growing pains. Everybody understands that. Yeah. But we can also not just hide behind growing pains forever.
Now that you mentioned the NIPDB, its future, well, if one has to circle back a few months ago, its future was, in terms of how this entity would shape out, was one of doubt. Now, there's been an official position taken that it revert back to the ministry and no longer resorts under the presidency, where there was a degree of autonomy. How do you see this affecting the ease of doing business and obviously the work that has been done since its establishment to attract the investment to Namibia? You
see, if you speak to the officials of NIPDB, and I've been dealing a lot with them, and I must say that the NIPDB is a very, very welcome step in the right direction. Whenever you spoke to them, they said they want to improve Namibia on the ease of doing business. That was one of the big mandates. And I think that they should maybe even be getting more autonomy rather than less. You know, more autonomy in terms of speaking to Home Affairs, speaking to NAMRA, to BIPA, to the banks, to everybody. They've been a great facilitator, but sometimes their facilitation stops at the level where they are saying, we are just a messenger, we cannot influence the outcomes. I would like them to have greater autonomy to also influence the outcomes. So I can't really understand why the NIPDB is seemingly demoted. And we've not really heard the reasons in public. What is there? Is an alternative coming up, or is the Ministry of Investment? You know, and two ministries have now merged: International Relations and Trade. MIRT is a big combined ministry for those for both big portfolios, and now they have to be incorporated into that big ministry. Again, there will be growing pains. It will take time to merge the two ministries per se. Now the NIPDB has to move in there. I don't know what the reasons are for that move, but I don't think it's a good one.
There's this argument that, well, NIPDB is not a business unit, therefore, you know, does it justify why it should exist? Is it bringing money in? Is it generating money? Is it creating that economic activity? Then how would you then argue against such views? And instead, people would say, but well, this is more of an agency than anything else.
Look, there's been criticism, and with every new thing that you establish in society or in government or wherever, there's always criticism, and we maybe sometimes concentrate too much on the criticism. But on a balanced analysis, I would say the NIPDB has really marketed Namibia as an investment destination internationally, and that obviously took a lot of money. You know, they went to Dubai and to all the big trade fairs in Europe, you know, and the current CEO, Mrs. Nangula Uwanja, has been taking various delegations overseas. So I think Namibia has become a well-known investment destination. So you got to give them credit for that. And then secondly, there's a lot of criticism sometimes. Again, NIPDB is just a messenger. They cannot really take a final decision. We're not getting the feedback. I cannot confirm the same personally, but I must also say we cannot shy away from the capacity that was taken up by the NIPDB in looking at the oil and gas sectors. and also the green hydrogen development. That is basically something that happened overnight, and that took up a lot of capacity of the NIPDB per se. Okay, the NIPDB should remain where they are. They should be more capacitated. More autonomy should be granted to them, because if we look at the investment climate per se, some investors also want an exit strategy. So if we can facilitate the exit of investors, if after 10 or 15 years an investor says, my business idea is no longer applicable because of changing environment, changing legislation, changing circumstances, or I don't have a successor who wants to take over my business, I don't have children or whatever, I can't, and I want to sell my business and I want to repatriate all the money back to where I live. That is also a very important test that an NIPDB can take care of. So I think the NIPDB has actually got more scope than less scope in working and dealing with the investors.
Then moving now on from the NIPDB, the establishment of this petroleum office within the presidency.
Yeah.
What does this say for projecting confidence out there to have that?
Yeah,
within
again,
the presidency?
I think it was announced and the reasons were not really given. I think the reasons should be given. The former president, Harald Hecht, also said we have to improve on our ease of doing business, we have to improve on our business climate. That's why the NIPDB will report to me directly, because I want to know what's going on in the oil and gas and in the green hydrogen sectors, for instance. Okay, so maybe if that's a temporary measure, one could maybe understand it and respect it, but I really can't comment on that. It can be portrayed as another wrong signal to the investment world.
Moving the conversation now on to green hydrogen, and you mentioned it earlier in the interview, was the news obviously of the resignation of James Newpay. And just looking at it holistically, do you believe perhaps that government is putting more emphasis on oil and gas and not so much on green hydrogen?
That's maybe the prerogative of the president and of the government, but so it's difficult for me to comment on that. I think what we just need, and the president has been talking about that, establishing that common vision in moving Namibia forward. So what is our common vision? That was also one of the reasons why we had this talk last Saturday, is to establish a common vision going forward. If James Newpay has resigned, resignations happen.
Yeah.
You know, that's part and parcel of modern life. But will he be replaced? Or he said he was frustrated because he didn't get the political support. So the political willpower to implement things and change things for the better, that is fundamental in changing the economic landscape of a country like Namibia. And maybe that is not made that clear. And maybe the president and the current government would be well advised to provide maybe a platform where the business sector, the private sector can ask questions. Why was James removed? You know, because everybody's been talking about James Newpay. He was the pillar. He was the whole green hydrogen industry, which made headlines internationally. He was the face of that initiative. Yes. Now maybe the second person could do a similarly good job. That remains to be seen. But we need a pronouncement from government now, responding to what James Newpay has said, and that they say, you know, we will advertise the position again. We've got candidates lined up already, possibly. We are still going ahead with that position. We are not abolishing that position. It's still a key component to us, green hydrogen.
Again, now circling back to issues of ease of doing business. The focus of our conversation has really been a lot on foreign or international investors. At a local, looking at this from a local scope, how difficult do you see this itself for Namibian entities that want to set up in terms of the taxes that they have to pay, gaining the various approvals, and how do you see these as unnecessary hurdles? Let's take the example of an SME that wants to do distribution, for example.
Well, if you speak to local businessmen, the few that have established their own the companies and even the SME sector, they all speak of frustrations. You know, the registration is a problem. The obtaining of collateral at banks is a problem. There are just seemingly endless hurdles. It's probably fair to say that a younger, smaller business person spends a lot of time on administrative hurdles and issues, whereas they should be maybe going outright in trying to make sure that they are establishing themselves and they are facing competition and they are making it. So there is definitely a big problem on the administrative burdens that young business people have to face. And we don't see the number of business people and the number of businesses evolving as we should.
The World Economic Forum would always have this, well, Namibia ranks, just putting out an example, 50th in Africa. Not necessarily the case, but and there are key recommendations: improve on this, do that, address that. But it doesn't seem as if much emphasis or effort is being made, because it would seem as if the answers are there. So now, why is implementation lacking on that front, in your opinion?
I wish I could answer that question, but I agree with you. We don't really have to reinvent the wheel. You know, there are easy solutions to all the problems. Maybe I can take an example. You know, Rwanda had a war 25 years ago, and 25 years ago, after the war had stopped, they came to Namibia and they looked at our trade and industry, you know, the way we were registering companies and CCs and doing very well, you know, and they copied those systems that were working very well for Namibia 25 years ago, and they took it back to Rwanda. Now, I've been told by an NIPDB delegation that visited Rwanda, you can register a company and a CC within one day and even open up a bank account, all within 24 hours at a one-stop service center. NIPDB is also still looking at the one-stop service center. The idea is there, but and that is the key problem. Implementation is a problem in this country, and I don't know why. Coupled to that, maybe the political willpower. Now, the president has been talking about the common vision, so I think let's start there. And let's establish that common vision. Do we want to bring Namibia forward economically and finally gain economic independence after the political independence has been obtained? I think also Namibia is now 35 years old. And when you are 35 years old in life, that's when you normally start your own businesses, when you take your own responsibilities, when you establish your own visions on how you want to feed your family. And I think the government should be looking at that vision. How do they want to feed the nation? Because that is really a big, big challenge that I'm worried about, with the increasing numbers in unemployment and the social and the dignity being lost and all the social problems that we are facing. Our social peace is really at stake. So it's high time to take that opportunity, to take that bull by the proverbial horn and tackle that. Establish the common vision, establish the political willpower, establish the dialogue, and we need results very, very, very quickly. Coupled to that is the lack of service delivery with a lot of public institutions that the president has also been alluding to. So I think she's been heading definitely in the right direction. I think the private sector is a little bit impatient. When is the implementation going to happen? So we as a forum see ourselves as providing that platform where we encourage people to start talking to each other, and that is what we did last Saturday. The public and the private sector started talking to each other, engaging, listening to each other's problems. Big step in the right direction.
I want to close with this in brief. I'll just put it out as a forum, or rather, let me say as a commentator. We want to ease doing business in Namibia. What are some of the immediate low-hanging fruits that we can look at just to sort of move this thing along steadily? Policy
finalization, and the second one is service delivery. Policy finalization needs to go through cabinet. We know that, okay? So that is probably a longer process, but we need to have a deadline for that. Maybe we can finalize it in the next 6 months. Service delivery, we can start implementing immediately, overnight, as from today, 12 o'clock.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Business7 show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on the Business7 show. Have yourself a pleasant evening.